Good morning. Last night we had a chance to play locally. Um, Brian had contacted me Thursday and said he'd like to invite me up to his place in Grand Junction, and would I run a game for he and his new wife and a couple of his friends. And I told him absolutely when. And we were able to arrange something for last night. So I spent Friday, I have Fridays off generally, so I spent Friday morning prepping. And this was going to be pretty much a thing, a mission they would have to do. So that meant I made a map, I had a plan, I created a city for them. I asked them would he like me to make their characters, how many people, by the way, because I know he runs 5e. He's told me before 6 to 7 people. This was years ago. He said no, there'll be 4 of us. I said great. So it's Brian, his wife Katie, her little brother Josh, and Phil. Never played. The last time I played with Brian and his girlfriend, it was not Katie. So I never said a word. But the funny thing is, whoever he was dating a couple of years ago is not who he's married. So, of course, right? I mean, he's a young man. Anyway, so the quarantine has been lifted in Grand Junction, and I think a week, 2 weeks ago. And anyway, it just coincided that he sent something. He said, listen, we want to do something. We want to celebrate. We can actually get together now and do this thing. And I want to break the ice. I have not played in a year. I've talked to Brian and Steve a couple of times over the last year since the event that stopped the group. We contacted Steve. Steve is not interested, and so it was Brian, his new wife, her brother Josh, and myself, and Phil. Okay, so then it was what? And I am enamored with, I just bought Warlock, the PDF. I'm waiting for the hardback full-color book to show up, which won't be here for a couple of weeks probably. I discovered that just a couple of days before. I think last Sunday I got an email from DriveThruRPG, games you might be interested in. I checked that when I got home from that weekend, and immediately bought the PDF and ordered the book and read it, and then read it again, then did a review that's on the channel here. And then Thursday got an email from Brian. I said, hallelujah, can we do Warlock? Do you have a plan for your group to find out what it's like to do old school? And they said, didn't care. They just want to play, and they wanted me to run some. So after prepping all day Friday and did not make their characters, we decided, again, we're going to have all night. Time is not an issue because I drive an hour and 15 minutes or so. So by God, I want to finish whatever we start. So we took our time. We made characters. They made characters one at a time. I do not own the book, so I had to take my old laptop with the Warlock PDF. And so I actually, for the first time ever, I GM'd face-to-face with a laptop between me and my group. And I've never used an iPad. I've never used a phone. This is offline. It's literally an old laptop. It's basically an excuse to look at PDFs or listen to music. My wife uses it for yoga music when she does yoga here at the house. So I took that. I had that in front of me. And we set out to make characters one at a time. And we tried to do this rules as written, the best I could understand it in a handful of reads. Again, the game is, when I read it, I was instantly enamored with it. After reading it multiple times and preparing something, I was utterly convinced that this is going to be as good as it looks. And indeed it was. It was unbelievable. There's a couple of things. So I told them the only thing we weren't going to do rules as written. Well, we made a couple of tweaks that just made sense. I wasn't going to let them roll 4 careers and pick one. I said you're going to roll a career, and that career you roll will be your character's career. We're going to simplify that process, and your career will be utterly random. And they were fine with that. And I warned them, you might want to wait and choose your name and your race and everything after you roll the career, just so it might, who knows what kind of bizarre thing would happen. Well, Brian went first, and he selected his race and his name and everything, and picked his 3 personality traits, which, by the way, don't affect game. They're just for role-play situations. And then he rolled his career. And as did his wife Katie, and as did little brother, as did Phil. And then little brother, after watching them make their characters that way, said, I'm going to choose my career before I name my stuff. So that was very good. So when I say little brother, he's probably 5 years younger than her. These guys are all in their 30s, mid-30s. And they've only ever played, Brian was running this, his local people with Pathfinder originally, and then went to D&D 5th edition. I believe he was using Sagabound. He was the one that introduced me to Sagabound, or Sagaborn, which I absolutely love. And so I think he was using basically D20, modern D20 games. Okay. So I explained to them the situation before we started. Ultimately, I'm going to put them in a city called Grand Union, right? And the reason for that is it's this grand city, and it's called Grand Union because it's where all four of the races coexist together. The humans, the elves, the dwarves, and the halflings. It's a metropolitan city in which all these races have to coexist. They might live in their own little cultures and their own little neighborhoods, etc. But the reality is all of them know each other and interact outside. This would be the melting pot city, right? And of course, Grand Union, and I named it Grand because it's a big city, but also because they live in Grand Junction. I thought it would be fun, so I did that. I told them this is basically British tabletop, early tabletop. I think it's supposed to be a D20ization of MERP, maybe? I can't quite tell. They don't actually refer to any other game. They just say British early tabletop gaming. I think it's meant to be Lord of the Rings-esque MERP. And what I love about it is without having any allusions to Lord of the Rings, in that we don't have to follow the canon. We don't have to worry about the details, the age, the timeline. So we're free to treat this like a Lord of the Rings type of themes and atmosphere. Again, Warlock implies that there is this evil Warlock about in the world that is recruiting and creating darkness and chaos. So it definitely is Lord of the Rings-esque, right, in its themes and its aesthetic. And so we love that. I love that. Brian likes that. Okay, so Brian made a halfling named Hezelbee Snodgrass. He rolled Raconteur. And again, every time you roll up a career, that gives you 5 career skills that actually have a higher cap. And there's maybe 25 skills in the entire game. You will have a rating for every skill. So there's no such thing as not having a skill. You will have a number in every single skill, which is good, because one of my issues with skill-based games is if there's skills and you don't have a number in it, ooh, I mean, how do you handle that when somebody does not have horseback riding? So at least you'll have a 4 minimum in everything. You'll have you can have up to 10 6s, 10 5s, and then the rest 4s. Well, meanwhile, those career stats have a cap. They can actually level up. The other ones cannot be changed until you change your career. So I'm going through this quickly, but hang in there. So I can't remember what his, my notes are here, but I'm not going to dig them out. So anyway, his is more like a spy / grifter, con man. They're supposed to be really good about lying and etc. And then you roll once you pick a career, you roll on these 2d6 charts. One is they're like 2 features from your history that kind of give flavor and background to your character. Okay. So I can't remember again right offhand what those are, but done, right? That's done. And then I told them they're allowed, while I was preparing how I was going to set up the mission, because I already had prepped what they were going to ultimately face. So this was in a way a railroad, and this was an adventure night. They were going to have a quest. They were going to have a mission. But I hadn't figured out how I was going to introduce that to them. I did tell them I want them to be friends. I want them to know each other and have some semblance of a group or a background. And then I would figure that out. So while they were all, and I told them you would get to select off the penny list of equipment up to 5 things. I didn't want to spend time buying stuff. I didn't want to worry about money and all that. So I told them, listen, here's the deal. You'll roll up your silver. You'll have your starting gear from your career. But then you can pick 5 pieces, 5 things off the penny copper list that you'll start this adventure with. But I told them to wait on that. I would spin the laptop around and let them all do that at the same time while I decided, once I got their characters, I would decide how I want to introduce the mission. Okay, so that's how that went. Whoa, sorry. I just kicked my camera. Okay, Katie went second. She made a elf named Paulatara, so 2 female names, Paulatara, and she just put them all together, Paulatara, the elf. And she rolled, and then I can't remember what her 3 were. Her 3 personality traits. Anyway, she rolled up Grave Robber, which was kind of a surprise to her. And then, of course, she outfitted. She actually took her small blades, which could go to a max of 12, and she put 6 of her 10 points in that. So her small blades were at 12 of 12. This was interesting because Katie suffered quite a bit that night with failed rolls. I think early in the game, she was very disappointed in the quality of success. Brian, I think, of about 50% success ratio. Katie, I think she succeeded 1 or 2 dice rolls all night long. But it is what it is, right? So I told him, it's just a look of the draw sometimes. Don't worry about it. But none of them stopped the game dead or anything. But failures, I do treat as failures, right? I don't do so much fail forward. Okay. So again, she had a certain set of equipment for her career, and then she selected her 5 later too. And again, all of them picked, for the most part, they diversified their adventuring gear, which was cool. So when I gave them the laptop so they could look at the chart, they were all pretty smart about saying, well, I'll carry this, you carry this, you carry. So it was very cool, and they tried to do it based on their character's class too, like what would be normal for them to have. And so I was appreciated. They were putting in a little effort into selecting their 20 total pieces of equipment, 5 each. And their food became a major deal. At the beginning, you'd get so much food, you roll randomly, see how much food and water you have to start. They never got more food. They never picked any more food. It was quite disastrous for them once they got into the caverns underground and were on their way to the catacombs and the tombs. They were starving, and it was affecting their stamina. And by the time they reached their destination, they were in potential life-threatening situation. Matter of fact, their first encounter their first combat encounter was because the creatures they were with were also starving, and it finally led to a conflict between the party and their hirelings, so to speak. So that was very cool. Okay. Phil made Dyson Stoneskin, a dwarf, and he rolled up Wizard's Apprentice, which cracked us all up because he had no intention of playing a wizard. He clearly made this dwarf. He had in mind that he was going to be kind of a stout warrior, typical dwarf, and he rolled Wizard's Apprentice, so it was pretty funny. So he has, and he was fine with it, but it changed in a way but what was cool about it was, and he rolled, you have to roll up 1 spell, so there's randomly you roll to see whatever spell in the entire game your character has and knows. And he rolled up Illusion, which allows him for 4 stamina points to create an illusion that'll last for 1d6 rounds, and this illusion can be the size of a table. And if he really spends his time concentrating, he can make it move and talk. So he could actually create like a dog or some kind of creature illusion. Okay. He never used it. He never ever cast the spell in the evening. But what was interesting is, again, Wizard's Apprentice has so many skills that have a certain max that you can put more points in, and so he actually put 5s in those. He spent points to bring those up, right? And then he put all of his 6s in combat abilities. So he made his dwarf basically a dwarf who was capable, at least at first level, with 6s in every martial ability. So bows, small blades, large blades, crossbows, blunt weapons, throwing and brawling. He put all 6s. He put 5s in 5 of his skills, and then he spent his 10 points to upgrade those, and then 4s in what was left, and the other 5s in what was left. And again, they picked their equipment later. Okay, and then we get to Josh, and Josh had watched them do their characters. What was good about this is it was a chance for them to learn how the game would work. It was a chance for them to kind of watch. They were forced in a way to witness Brian create a character. And then because of that, they began to know Brian's character. And then by the time, she made her character, everybody knows Brian's character and her character. And then so it was really an effective way for them to kind of create, through their character gen and listening to them talk about their character and build their character quickly, like they knew each other. When we launched the game, they already knew each other. They already knew each other's names. They knew each other's personalities. They knew what their careers were. So it actually was really effective for a one-off, no session zero, let's go one night deal. It was perfect. And we've done this before, but we take it for granted with groups we know well, especially when you're just rolling 3 dice 6 straight down, and we're playing, D&D. I'm a cleric, and I'm a thief, and I'm a, what's your name? I don't know. This was very cool, right? And again, I'll say it more than once before this is over. Warlock, my new favorite game, period. Not just OSR, but it's my favorite game. It's perfect for me. I wish, I was telling Dale when I first read it, I was excited about it, but at the same time sad, because Dale and I were developing our own game, and I've got to tell you, I've had more than one ping that I wish I wrote Warlock. So that'll tell you how much I like Warlock. Okay. All right. So we get to Josh. He rolls first, and he gets Noble. And he immediately says, oh, I'm from a big family, long line. I said, that's great. And he said, so I'm going to name my character appropriately. So he names him Harkus Octavius Julianus Maximilian. Harkus is what we called him. But I thought, oh my God, so he's like the 8th, Octavius is like, he's like the 8th sibling in this huge noble family. And then, of course, you have to roll why your noble is no longer at home, and his was something like he had to leave due to a love conflict, like he probably screwed the maid or something, or screwed the underhouse parlor maid or something. Anyway, a love he couldn't requite. And then he rolled, I think, would go home if the minute they ask him or tell him he can come home, he would go home. So his character pines for home. Okay, and then he, being a noble, he then named his character appropriately, and he picked proud, picky, and bossy as his personality, which was great, because it makes sense of a nobleman who's been displaced from his home. He put 6 of his points in diplomacy, so he had a moment in the game where his character negotiated with a rat man king underground, and it got them a couple days shelter and food. And it then set up for them to hire 4 ratmen as hirelings as they continued on toward the tombs. And it was brilliant. And that 12 diplomacy really aided Josh in that particular role play. And it allowed them to make allegiance with ratmen, right? And so a couple of things I love about Warlock is it describes monsters as monsters, otherworldly, civilized or uncivilized. And this, to me, is genius, because, as I explained to them, goblins are civilized. These ratmen are civilized. Unmen. And unmen are just any kind of human, monstrous human species. So they can be gnolls, kobolds, orcs, basically, urukai. So they could have the head of a bear and the arms of a bear and the feet of a bear, and but be human. They're like these bizarre, twisted, human, mutated creatures. But think gnolls, kobolds, whatever, right? They're humanoid monstrosities, but they're civilized. And I said what that means is they're not inherently evil. They have culture. This culture may be utterly different and foreign to you, but that doesn't mean that they're evil and that the minute they see you, they'll kill you. So understand that they are still civilized beings. They're not necessarily good or evil. They might be utterly different than you, and they might be your enemies, and they might have different goals, and they might be dangerous, etc., etc. And so I've made sure I explain that. This isn't like D&D where the orc is just flat evil kind of thing. Okay. So now we have our characters. They've selected their equipment. And I said, okay, I had already prepared that this was going to be, I wanted them to go into an old ruined elf city, and I wanted them to go into the tombs to recover something. And so I had made a ruined map of a ruined city. I had made an overland hex crawl of just something like 5 days total distance. And I had made an underground catacombs tombs that they would have to deal with. And the elf ruined city happened to be overrun by unmen, right? And not necessarily friendly unmen, right? And I told them, think orcs. These guys are orcs. Okay. And so I said, okay, now we have all of our characters, and we have Paulatara, and she's a grave robber. I said, this is perfect. What's in the tomb is, this is an old elf ruined city. What's in the tomb is the old queen of the elves, and because the humans and Grand Union has allowed these orcs to take up residence in the old ruins, they now fear reprisals from the elves if they don't recover this queen's body, because they've become lazy and they've allowed these orcs to move into these ruins. And so an elf emissary with a human colleague approaches Paulatara in the underground gambling saloon. And again, this is where she meets her clients, people who ask her to go exhume bodies, dig up bodies and bring them to whoever, right? This is what she does for a living. She's not a grave robber so much as she does it to make money, but she obviously fences and loots this gear when she recovers bodies and things, right? Okay, and so they approach her and they say, listen, we know you do this deal, you're an elf. We have a major potential political crisis that could lead to some hostilities from the elf kingdom. We need you to go into that ruin and recover the queen's body with her crown and her scepter. Anything else you recover is yours. You get to keep it. We'll pay you 8 gold. She agreed, but she tried to negotiate. She wanted more gold for the whole crew. She felt miserably. And they promised them 8 gold. That'd be 2 each. And they get to keep any other spoils they get except the crown and the scepter. They'll have to have those. And by the way, keep this quiet. Don't tell anybody what you're up to. And if you succeed, we will even pay the fees to the town criers and the heralds to tell your story on the streets of Grand Union. So you'll get some notoriety and you'll get a potential notoriety for doing this if you succeed. So we'll also pay for that fee. And she said, okay, that's a fair deal. They all agree to do this. And I explained it. Brian then ultimately says, listen, I'm a raconteur. I'm around. I tell lies for a living. I tell rumors. I tell stories. I'm always up to something. And I want to contact one of my people here in Grand Union and see if I can get some information about this ruined elf city and who these unmen are and what's the conditions. And I said, absolutely. We don't even need to roll that up. And I said, why don't we make it the same person that Paulatara uses to fence her stuff? And they're like, perfect. We both know this person. His name's Trowley. And I said, he's this old, fat, gross human. He's always flirting with her. And he's not disloyal, but he's always about profit. And he tells them, and Brian had seen, so what Brian was about was he saw on the gold, on the items maps, on the item list in Warlock, he saw under gold, there was an accurate map. And so he said, I basically want to get an accurate map from this guy. And I said, okay. So I rolled die 6 to see how much this guy wanted for it. He wanted 3 gold. So they attempt again to negotiate. Fortunately, Josh makes this diplomacy check. He negotiates. I allow him to use diplomacy because of the way he went about talking to this guy, who he didn't know, by the way. Hezelbee and Paulatara knew this guy. But the way he went about saying, trust me, we cannot tell you the details, but this could save Grand Union from a potential war. So because he bargained by bringing up some diplomatic kind of tone, I let him use his 12. And so he wins, and he gets it down to 2 gold. So they scrape together all their silver, which adds up to about 1.2 gold, and they still owe him about a gold piece. And he says, take the map, but I get a higher percentage of the fence when you bring me any goods back, and when you get paid, you owe me a gold piece. And they said, that's a deal, we'll take it. So now they've been able to get a map, and they've been able to find out from Trowley that of what he's heard of this ruined city, which is about 30 some odd miles northeast of Grand Union. So they've got a trek. I mean, they got a long way to go. That it is overrun, that it has become a kind of a city for these Unmen who aren't necessarily relegated to darkness. So they're living on the earth. They're living on the terra firma, right? They're not subterranean here. They're living actually in the ruins on top of the earth. And so they learn at least that these guys might not be relegated to underground living. So they're not necessarily goblins, and these, if there are orcs, which is what I kind of suggested they were, they may not be living that way. So they kind of, okay, so that prompts them to say, we want a map about how to infiltrate underground. And I said, absolutely. So he sells you this map that is that about 4 miles to the east of here is a subterranean entrance into caverns. And those caverns supposedly have been mapped, but it's hundreds of miles of underground caverns, which supposedly can lead to the catacombs of the old ruined city, which will eventually lead you into the queen's tombs, which would have been right under the heart of that elf city, under the old castle of the king and the queen. And they got their map. They head out, they get there, and I said, okay, you're going to have to make a navigation check to get started and use this map properly. And I believe it was Katie. Katie made the spot roll, and I think she spent 4 points on her spot. So I think she had something like 8 or 9 points in spot. But I gave them with the map a +4, and I gave them with a torch another +1. So they had +5, plus her 9, 14. All she needed was a 6 or better, and she rolled a 2, I think, and she failed. And so I described how they set off, and I described that one day in, they think they're going in the right direction. 2 days in, they think they're going in the right direction, and they're down now to 1 or 2 days of food. Third day in, they think they're going in the right direction, and they realize that as they run out of food, and they start to suffer stamina loss, and they realize we're going in the wrong direction. I would have them make rolls, and if they scored a certain number, 20 plus, I would prompt them to correct their thing. Well, they weren't making, and they didn't know. They just kept going. I kept telling them. Finally, on the 4th day, they do get a 22, I think, and I tell them, you now know you've been going 4 days in the wrong direction. You think you're over here somewhere. And they're hungry now. So one of the things I love about Warlock is stamina is quite literally stamina. It is exhaustion. It is stress. It can be minor wounds and injuries, fatigue. It is brilliant. So when your stamina drains to 0, now any damage that you suffer from combat could literally be a killing blow. Could be an injury or killing blow. So what's brilliant about this? It allows us to use stamina in such a way that they can recognize the lethality and the stress their characters are under. But when they hit 0, or if they hit 0, they don't die. It's just that if they were to get in a fight at 0, they could potentially die in every hit. So they recognize the value of the stamina that's going. Well, here's what's also cool about Warlock. If they get 1 night's rest, they heal all stamina back instantly the next day, or any amount of rest that's, I think, 6 to 8 hours. And if they're eating and drinking, of course, they can score back. Post-fight, let's say they get in a fight and one of them loses 10 stamina in the fight. If they rest 30 minutes after the fight, they'll get back 5 of that. They'll get back half of that. It's basically it's a minor short rest. Love it. And because of this, again, they are not only am I taking a stamina point per day they can't eat and drink, but they can't heal. So they don't wake up the next morning back to normal. They literally are not able to recover stamina. So they're losing. There's this war of attrition as they travel, and they're underground, so they cannot find food. At one point I say you did find some underground water, and they were able to fill their canteens, but they weren't able to eat. They get back on track about their 5th day, and I think this whole journey was something like 11 days is what it took them as they were in this huge. Remember, they got to travel 35 miles, subterranean caverns that go right, left, backward, backtrack, up, down. It's not as the crow flies, right? This isn't cross country to the tower, right? At some point, they come across ratmen, and they're able to with posture talk to these Ratman guards, and these Ratman guards basically under threat of spear, they surround them and they take them to their king, Rufus. And this is where Josh uses his diplomacy again. He steps forward and he says, your highness, and he drops to a knee and he kisses the Rat King's ring. And they negotiate. They say, listen, here's the deal. We're on a mission to the ruined city with the Unmen, which is dangerous. You don't really want these guys finding you and encroaching this way. And then he says, we're going to come back with treasure, and I think a king like you should have more in your coffers. We're willing to share some treasure if you'll let us stay here for a couple days, rest, and feed us. And would you be willing to give us 4 of your henchmen to go with us to help us on this journey? And they'll bring back, they will bring back some treasure for you. We'll split it with you. And the king, of course, loves this. It's an easy roll. I give him a +4 bonus to his 12, so 16. All he needs is basically not to roll a 1, 2, or 3, right? 4. And so he easily nails this. They get 4 Ratmen to go with them. They stay for 2 days. They eat whatever vile mess is put in front of them, and they don't really want to know. They don't investigate, but they eat because they have to. Their stamina's filled up immediately, and they actually pack about 3 days of this Ratman stuff they're eating into their packs. And they head off now with 4 Ratmen accomplices. So there's 8 of them now, 4 henchmen. And they get lost again. And this goes on for another 3 or 4 days. When they run out of food, 2 days in, the Ratmen start getting a little dangerous, a little snarky, and they start threatening. They start getting very hostile because, again, they're starving and they're Ratmen. And Paulatara has an intimidation score, I think, of 8. And so she intimidates them the first time they get out of line. She intimidates them back into the place. And they proceed. And in another day and a half, 2 days, again, they're all losing stamina. The Ratmen are losing stamina. Everybody's starving. Everybody's losing stamina. This time, she can't intimidate them. She fails to intimidate them, and they end up in a conflict. The Ratmen actually attack them because they're starving, and they want to kill them and eat them. And we have this 4-round combat with the Ratmen. This is one of the things I love about when I read this book. One of the first things I always do is go look at character sheets to see, well, what do these character sheets entail? Then I usually go and look at how do you create a character, and then I always go immediately to combat because I want to see how combat is handled. And I fell in love with their basic core mechanic, and I fell in love with their combat. And of course, the character gen is brilliant. So combat is opposed, which means you never fail, right? Somebody's always going to get hurt. So you roll the die to hit. If you roll higher than your opponent, so you'll add to that your weapon, your skill. You'll add to that your weapon skill, and you have to just roll higher than your opponent with his modifiers, which might count shields and armor, etc., or defense or something. But no matter what, there's never a miss. There's never a stalemate. Somebody's always wounded when an attack starts. Well, here's the other thing that's freaking awesome about this. It is reasonable movement, reasonable action. All of that is based on probability of reasonable, something you can do reasonably in 10 seconds. And this, for theater of the mind guys, old school guys like me who've been doing this for years, this way anyway, homebrewed, this is beautiful to see a book that just writes it that way and says, hey, we are in support of doing it this way. Here's the rules. Don't worry about these procedural nonsense about movement. And so I truly love this. And you can disengage from any melee combat without opportunity attacks against you. There is nothing to stop you from changing targets or running away from combat. And this, again, is brilliant because they describe it as melee's chaos. It's crazy. And your character is going to be able to fluidly move from target to target or leave combat or disengage. And again, these are the things for theater of the mind that are so important because we're not using maps and minis and tactics. Okay, but initiative is huge because initiative not only allows your team to go first, it's side initiative. You get a +5 to attack rolls if you win initiative. So it's huge. So when you win initiative, you're not only getting your +6 with your sword, you're getting a +5 for winning initiative. That's +11. Your odds of hitting and winning that engagement with that creature go way up. So there's 4 Ratmen and there's 4 of them, and they're all engaged in one-on-one. They all win the initiative on the first round, and they all hit and cause damage. Second round, though, the Ratmen win, and they suffer. Third round, the Ratmen win again, but they win a couple of these anyway, and kill 2 of the Ratmen. So Paulatara and Hezelbee have killed their opponents, and they dive into the fray to help their buddies in the third round. They kill the third one in the third round. Again, they won initiative there. In the fourth round, the last Ratman wins initiative, and because he can disengage and flee without question, he won initiative. He just runs off into the dark. So they've won this thing. They've routed these Ratmen. They're starving. They're injured now. They've actually got stamina loss from the fight. They cannot heal this back in 30 minutes. They cannot heal it back if they rest because they can't eat or drink. They are faced with, what are we going to do? And they actually, I think Phil, the dwarf, actually suggests the Ratmen, like rats, why don't we cook them and eat them? And all of them said, even Phil, after he said it, was like, eh. They all said, no way, man, we are not, no way. That's too, they're too humanoid for us. And we talked to them and we traveled with them and we're not going to eat them. That's cannibalistic. So they decided they would endanger their lives and continue on, having still no nourishment. And they know now that Ratman escaped backtracked. They know that he's probably going to return to the King Rufus. So now their chances of going back to the king on their way out of here are, which they might not have wanted to do anyway, but now they could be facing severe penalties if this rat man goes back and tells lies that they murdered him, etc., etc. Okay. So they kind of lost their... And again, these are webs of caverns and caves. They go all over the place. So they don't have to go back toward the rat man. But they don't know... they haven't looked at the map for any other exits. They do later, though. Brian says later, let's look for a way out of here. Okay. They travel on another couple of days, and at this point, I think Hezelbee and Paulatara are down to like 10, maybe 9 stamina. So they're getting very close to their lives being in jeopardy if they get into another fight. And they finally come to a dead end, a stone door that is magically warded, and all of them come together using their history and their language, including Paulatara's elf abilities. And they help her decipher. It's an automatic. I give them an automatic. They're able to read these runes, and they're able to decipher that they need the blood of an elf, a live elf, and they need to whisper the words, and that will open the door. And so that means, okay, it means that she's got to cut her hand open, no big deal. And when she sticks her hand upon the door and whispers the words, it sucks blood from her, and she suffers, I rolled 1d6 minus 2, 4, 2 points of damage, so she suffers 2 more stamina. She's down to like, I think, 8 when they get the door open. And when the door opens, it's thick with webs, and they now know, oh damn, but this is the Queen's temple. They're able to read. This is the final resting place of the royals, of the royal family. They know the Queen is behind that door, but it is thick with webs, and so they're now going, one spider, 4 spiders, 8 spiders. What the hell? They light every torch they have. They all, I think, took candles and torches, so they were having candles lit and torches lit. They light these webs on as they traverse in, and I tell them it takes them about a half a day's travel to get to the center of these tombs, which would be right below the center of the city. There is 0 evidence that the Unmen have been down here. There's 0 evidence that really anyone's been down here that hasn't been killed by the spiders or spider. They burn their way through the webs to the center of town. It takes them all day or half a day. And then they get there, and I said, here's the thing, which tomb is it? And there's about 4 tombs. And I said, any of you can make this check, but Paulatara, being a grave robber and an elf, probably is the best chance. And one of these tombs is legitimate. The others are going to be foe, right? They don't put, here lies the Queen, because if grave robbers do come, they would like them to rob the wrong queen, not the right queen. So she's got to decide which of these tombs is the legitimate queen and which are the fake queens, right? Well, guess what? She fells that roll, and they decide they're just going to go to the one that looks the most likely and start. So a couple hours into crowbars and shovels and digging, they get this thing open. And in fact, it's not the Queen, right? It's not even. I mean, it's like they buried a maid there or something, right? There's no jewels, there's no treasure, there's nothing. So they know, okay, that tomb clearly isn't. They then move to the next one, and she's already filled the roll, so I won't let them roll again. They're going to have to just go one at a time until they get the right one. Well, the next one they choose, they excavate. It is right. They just went in a counterclockwise. It turns out it was that one. There were 4. They get this thing open. There's the crown, the Queen, the scepter, and there's jewels. There's a gold necklace with rubies. There's rings on her fingers. So they know they're going to get some gold out of this. They're going to be able to fence some of this stuff. They've got her body. So she actually has in her grave robber inventory body bags. So they bag the body up. They have the crown and the scepter, which they leave with her body in the bag, and they just sew it, tighten it up. And the dwarf agrees to carry this thing. And so they've got this thing, this body over his backpack, tied to him in his backpack. And so this dwarf will be carrying back this. It's a little elf queen. I mean, who knows how old she was when she did whatever. Okay, and then they have the rings and the necklace, and they're now. What do we do? Because we're starving. They got the spider waylaid them in the middle of excavating the second tomb. The spider waylaid them. And the spider went after the little guy, Hezelbee, first. And this was a giant spider. Now, to the halfling, it was a really big spider. To the dwarf and the human, the size of a pony, basically. And to the elf. And it hit Hezelbee for 9 points, knocking him down to 4 stealth in round 1. And he made his luck roll to avoid being poisoned. They then, all 4 of them were able to overwhelm this spider and kill it on the 3rd round. Only Hezelbee had been hit by it, and Hezelbee took 9 points of damage. And again, he didn't get poisoned, thank God, because he would have taken damage every round. So he is hurting. He's at 4, I think, and they're losing points every day they can't eat. And so Brian, as Hezelbee says, listen, we've got to get surface top. We got to get top level where we can forage, we can hunt. We got to get out of these subterranean. But they don't want to go. They don't want to get out in the center of these ruins where there's unmen everywhere. So they look on the map, and he says, well, I want to make a navigation check. Can I find something on this map that shows maybe a surface in under the surface exit that's far enough away on the map that I could assume is outside these ruined cities? And I said, absolutely. And so he makes a roll. And she wants to aid him, so I give him a +1 for her. And Phil, the dwarf, says, "I'll aid him. I'm a dwarf. I'm accustomed to underground stuff." And I said, "Great." So I gave him a 2. So basically, I just gave him a total of +4. So normally, it recommends in the book you give 2s or 4s in either positives or penalties. So I gave him a 4. So basically, those 2 helping gave him a +4. So he makes this roll and says, "Okay, it looks like about 5 miles east of the city, there is an exit to the surface." And they assess that half a day's march in put them in the center of the city. So if it's 5 miles, that would probably get them on the outskirts of the city, and they're going to gamble and going to go for it. So they travel after, and so again, this is all, they don't even know if it's day or night. They have no idea if it's nighttime, or because they've been under here for days. They've been, I think at that point I told them it's like 9 or 10 days you've been underground. They get there, they pop up, it's nighttime, they immediately camp. And they immediately all start to forage and look, because they've got to get healthy before they run into something, especially now that they've lost another day. And at this point, Harkus, Hezelbee is down to 3 stamina. So combat would potentially get some of them killed. All of them fail their survival checks to look for food, except for Harkus. The nobleman actually gets something. And I said, okay, it'll be enough to feed all of you for tonight, which means as long as you can rest through the night and you've ate something, you'll get all your stamina back. So they get through the night. They're all fully back up to full stamina, but they have no more food. So again, they're going to have to trek back. And I said, you can now from the map, you can actually see in the distance the city, the Grand Union, and it's about 2 days straight double time march. And they all agree, we're hungry, we have no food, we want to make sure we travel slow, we want to travel cautious, we want to avoid any potential threats, and we want to forage as we go. We don't want to be caught in this position. And I said, if you want to do all those things, all you have to do is one of you make 1 full survival check right now with a +4, and it'll just take you 4 days to get home, because you're going to take your time, you're going to forage as you go, you're going to make sure you avoid areas where there might be monsters, beasts, or enemies, or creatures, but it'll take you 4 days to get home. And again, they choose, the dwarf I think has a 5 survival, everybody else has a 4, so the irony is none of them obviously expected to be doing survival, but the dwarf has a 5. And he did get a 12, I think, +4, I think. So anyway, I think he got it, but he got it, I can't remember what the number was, but he got it. Dynas, Stoneskin, got it. That was Phil's character. And so I just narrated how over 4 days they're able to pick berries, they're able to kill a rabbit, they're able to find shelter, they're able to sleep with minor fire, they're able to avoid creatures, and they finally get back to Grand Union. And I said, but you've got a body now strapped to your back, you cannot walk the streets of Grand Union. And one of the things I love about Warlock, it also talks about weaponry. It is frowned upon to be carrying shields and weapons that are wartime weapons in the streets of cities. So these are wartime things, so you generally have to store them or put them away or whatever. But either way, they access the sewers. Paulatara, she deals with these cultures that hide in the sewers, these thieves guilds and things, at the gambling saloon that she was found in originally when they offered her. So they go into the sewers outside of Union, they travel through the city of Grand Union, and they come out and they send the diplomat, they send Harkus to the elf, to Ben Valen and Samson. Ben Valen, the elf that hired them, and Samson, the human associate that hired them, to their headquarters, and they agree to meet them in the middle of the night and transfer the body over. And so they do this, and they're paid their 8 gold. They then go back to Tralee, and they fence the. They just give him the ring. for payment due on the map. They keep the map. They give him the ring. The map is huge. There's all kinds of adventures that could occur on this map. They give him the ring. They then fence the necklace and rubies, and they get a total of 16 silver pieces for that. And they all divide that equally, 4 silver pieces, plus they got 8 gold, so 2 each. Okay, so that's done, right? The ring paid their debt. They didn't have to give up a gold. So they all got 2 gold and 4 silver for this adventure. And I gave them 2 experience points. I gave them 1 experience point for achieving success. I gave them the 2nd experience point because the next day they start hearing rumors, and they start hearing the heralds on the street, and they start hearing bards singing about this, and their names being talked about. And as they go to the tavern, and then somebody says, "Hey, you're I just heard about you. You look you know," and so I gave them another XP. So they got an XP because indeed Branvalen and Samson do what they say they're going to do. They tell the heralds to sing the tale of these brave people who saved the queen's body from the overrun Unman. And so they get another XP. And then they can spend those XP to increase their career skill, which increases all of their career skills 1 up, I believe, is how it works. And they did that. They just went ahead and increased their stuff. I didn't look it up, so I may not have done that exactly right. But I said you basically can increase your career 2 points. That career pushes everything up 2 points, I think. They may have to spend them individually on those. And remember, you cannot increase any skills that aren't your 5 career skills, and you cannot increase career skills beyond their max. But you can change careers. And then later, as you change careers, you can start building other skills up. And then eventually, you can do what are called advanced careers. So I love this game. I can tell you right now, for $6 PDF on DriveThruRPG, this is a brilliant little OSR that is not D&D-esque. This is not D20. This is something else entirely. It is one of the easiest to run and one of the most interesting character gen. I love it. I truly love this game, and I'm going to tell you now, it is currently my favorite game. And this is just in one run with 3 strangers and Brian. I cannot tell you enough how good this little game is, and I look forward to running it more. We did not plan on any other sessions in the future. I'll just wait, and if Brian contacts me again, or maybe I'll write him and contact him when I'm ready to do something, and we'll see. Great people. Phil Dyson, the dwarf, did very little rolls. I think he may have made 4 rolls on the night. He was not very aggressive or active. He's kind of a wallflower player. I don't know if this is because he didn't know me very well, or if it's because that was his character, or if it's because that's how he always plays. I don't know. Josh was great. Josh made only about 6 rolls, but he succeeded on 4 of 6, I think. Katie had a horrible night as far as her rolls, and I did track it, by the way. I actually ticked their rolls. When I asked them to make a roll, I ticked it. If they succeeded, I circled it, so I could see the failure rate. She had 12, I think she had 12 rolls. She succeeded on only 2 the whole night. So early in the game, I could see she was a little frustrated and a little irritated with this. They're accustomed to D&D, and where they might be trying an easy check, which means their skill alone will make the check, or they get a +5 or a +6 to a die 20 roll when all they need is a 10. And I could just tell halfway through, they were having a great time, and they began to recognize, okay, I get it, I understand it. Brian, I think, had about 9 or 10 rolls, and he succeeded on about 50% of them. These were non-combat rolls, right? These are all skill checks that I asked for due to something they did as they narrated or played or demanded or asked. Can I read these runes? Right? Oh, can I hunt? Right? And I would say, okay, make a roll. But the combat, I tracked it in the rounds, but I didn't track whether they won because they're opposed checks, so it's all dependent on whether I roll 20s or I roll 18s or whatever, right? So it's not fair necessarily to track that, because that's opposed. I could roll 1s and they could win every round, right? That kind of thing. But the skill checks was eye-opening. She made maybe 2 of 12, which was horrible, about 10%. He made maybe 45%. Josh did get like 60%, but he only rolled 6 times. And I think Dynas, Phil, maybe had 4 rolls all night and didn't succeed at any. Well, 1. He did succeed at 1, I think. That was it. But holy cow, fantastic. So again, it went well. I do appreciate Brian reaching out for this group. We did try to contact Steve and say, would you like to join us? There was a no, and he also let us know that he's moving. He's moving. He's leaving Colorado. He's going to move back to his home state. So Steve is moving on, right? Which is it's his prerogative. So I don't know when we'll play again, but I got to tell you now, anybody watching, Warlock is fantastic. It's worth it, and it was one of the funnest games. And reading it, I knew this could be potentially brilliant. I found myself going, man, I wish I had written this. And now I have had a chance to run it raw, first time, with mostly strangers, and it was brilliant. And so therefore, that tells me a lot about this game. So, all right, everybody out there, have a wonderful weekend. See you next time.